My next guest, Amy Arnette, is a director of insurance solutions with DPL Financial. And one of the questions we're going to talk about today, which is very critical, especially with the aging of America, us getting the graying of America, if you will, is this whole idea of long-term care planning. Because I promise you, either you have planned or you're about to plan for long-term care. Either way, it's coming towards you. And I thought it'd be a great idea this morning to have Amy Arnette, again, who's a director of insurance solutions with DPL Financial, to talk us through some of the pitfalls and challenges. Amy, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dale. I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm very good. So when we talk about long-term care planning, what is the primary goal of long-term care planning?
The primary goal of long-term care planning is to protect your assets from the downfall of having to pay for assisted living, home health care, and nursing home care out of pocket.
Okay.
So if you become disabled in some form or fashion or have a cognitive impairment, that is when long-term care steps up.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about long-term care, I think it's been kind of like a bucket category, right? People hear about it in general, but what exactly is it for those who may or may not know, and what challenges does it present to families?
So if someone is unable to do 2 of their 6 activities of daily living, or they suffer a cognitive impairment, then they're going to need some form of home health care or assisted living care or nursing home care. Assisted living and nursing home care is in a facility, whereas home health care is at your home. So, that's what long-term care is taking care of you in the event that those things happen. And it can be devastating both to family members, friends, and even financially, it can be devastating if you don't plan for it.
And planning for it is so critical. And I must say this, that when we talk about long-term care planning, and a lot of our audience is like 50, 55 plus, you feel like you got plenty of time, right? Especially as a male, we feel like we're bulletproof. And then all of a sudden you reach that peak and you're like, oh crap, time is running out. The runway is getting shorter and shorter. So how do you convince someone in their 50s and 60s that they absolutely need long-term care, and why should they get it?
It's in my experience, what I try to do is educate individuals on what their choices are, provide statistics on the chance of needing care. Most individuals in their mid 50s and early 60s are pretty understanding of the situation because a lot of times they've actually lived through it with a parent or an aunt or an uncle. So I think the key is providing the education of what exactly the long-term care is, what their choices are, and how it can benefit them financially, and what it would cost them financially, if they have long-term care or if they don't have long-term care insurance.
So it sounds like it's a priority. I mean, you don't have a choice in terms of long-term care if you want to live the type of life that you want to live. And continue the income streams, et cetera, correct? Kind of like it's protecting your assets as you age with long-term care planning, yes?
It absolutely is. I mean, your whole life you've planned for retirement and you've built this nest egg. And if you haven't prepared for long-term care, whether if it's a portion of your nest egg or if you're going to let an insurance company take on that risk for you. If you haven't planned for it and it happens, that nest egg could just explode. And, it could be with the husband and wife situation that one goes out on claim and depletes those assets, so that healthy individuals' lifestyle has to dramatically change. And, you don't want that to happen.
Right. Given the fact that you have 36 years of experience in the insurance industry with a focus on life, long-term care, and disability income, I understand this is kind of a family business, if you will. Off mic, you shared the story about your dad who had a Cadillac plan in terms of insurance. How'd that work out for him? And what were the details, if you don't mind sharing with our audience?
No, not at all. So yes, my dad was an insurance agent. And back in the mid to late 80s is when we got really hot and heavy into long-term care insurance with an insurance carrier that we represented quite regularly. And, you know, they came out at that time with really comprehensive plans, unlimited benefits, you know, just really a Cadillac, just like you said.
Yeah.
And so, you know, him being the insurance guy and knowing that he didn't want me changing his diaper, bought this Cadillac plan. It had premium rate increases along the way, but he absorbed those because of the benefit plan that it was, and it was still more affordable than starting over. Unfortunately for him, he ended up getting diagnosed with a sickness. And when he went home from the hospital, we had 3 weeks of home health care, and then he passed away. So, you know, his Cadillac plan didn't get to care for him as long as he anticipated, but the peace of mind knowing that, and even while he was sitting in the hospital, knowing that, well, you know what, if he's going to have some type of care for the rest of his life, we know that we have that with the insurance policy, and his wife is not going to have to change her lifestyle.
I would encourage our listeners to contact Amy Arnette at dplfp.com, because when you talk about the Cadillac plan, a lot of us are in our generation, you have to have life insurance. We really don't look into it. And you shared a personal story. So now here's my personal story, is that my wife and I bought a plan, what we thought was a Cadillac plan. To your point, it keeps stepping up in premiums as we've aged. And now we're at a point now where this plan is continuing to decrease, whereas the premiums continue to increase, and we have shorter runway. So we're kind of in that predicament now. So I encourage those of you who are in the same place we are to please reach out to Amy Arnette. Other stories, Amy, in terms of your experience in this industry for 36 years?
I mean, yeah, I could tell you a lot of stories. You know, my aunt, you know, for probably better than a year, my aunt and uncle did not have long-term care insurance. And so my uncle cared for my aunt at home. It was a dementia of some form that she had. And to see the wear and tear that it did on him and my cousin in caring for her, it's not just about being able to afford the facility. It's about making sure that your family isn't burdened. And it does, as much as you hate for it to sound like, oh, I don't want to burden my family, it does become a burden to the family. And you don't, as a child, you take on that responsibility. You say, oh no, I'll take care of them. But at night when you go to bed, it's like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. It just wears down that family.
You get the emotional toll, you get the financial impact, which we're going to talk on our next episode with you when we talk about caregiving. But you hit on something very critical when you're talking about your aunt and others. I was reading an article in Modernize It, which talked about up to 75% of Americans want to age in place. And so it seemed to me that when we talk about how to customize a long-term care plan, that can help a lot of families who have this as their goal, which is to age in place at home, correct? Yes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, of course, my dad was at home. You know, that's what we did, is we took him home. We in hopes that he would improve, but, you know, he didn't. And that's where my aunt wanted to be, was at home. There's no way she would have survived in an institution. But it would have been a relief had my uncle had some support that he could rely upon, professional support and skilled support, so that he could have his respite as well.
And so in conclusion, Amy, when we're talking about long-term care planning, it allows you to be able to choose your care setting, how much care you receive, who's going to come in and give it to you. You basically have more options towards that you normally would not have, which to me seems like the best selling, I hate to say selling, but the best selling sales proposition. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It just gives you freedom of choice, and you have control over your own life. And, you know, everybody likes to have control, and not too many people want to give it up. So having that insurance is a peace of mind that you have that control.
When we talk about having that control, we're going to talk about that sandwich generation, having to take care of parents, having to take care of your family. And we're going to talk more about that when Amy returns. And Amy, I certainly hope you'll come back to talk to us about caregiving. And for our listeners, hope you've enjoyed my interview with Amy Arnette. She's a director of insurance solutions with DPL Financial with 36 years of experience in the insurance industry. Call her, reach out to her, dplfp.com, on how she can help you with your long-term care and disability income insurance for individuals. Amy, I truly appreciate your time. Please join us on a future edition of Aging with Grace 55 Plus.
Absolutely, Dale. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Bye. Our next guest, Julia Inman, has a great story. And we're just going to jump right into it because, as we age, all of us think about having some adventures, right? It's like there's something that I've got to be able to do. It's on your bucket list. Everybody has a bucket list. And I'm always impressed when people actually do what's on their bucket list. And my next guest, Julia Inman, did just that. Welcome to Aging with Grace 55 Plus. How are you, Julia?
I'm great. Thank you.
Good. Well, you and your husband, Terry Brabb, you guys did something really cool in 2014. I understand that you bought a 45-foot catamaran and took to the sea. Was this on your bucket list? And if so, how did this come about?
It was definitely my husband's bucket list. He's always wanted to do this. And I'm just pretty adventurous, and it sounded like great fun. So everybody, the best advice we got was don't wait. Everybody waits too long. You always think I'll work another year, get some more money, and then you don't do it. So we just decided, let's do it. And
let's
we
do it.
did.
Well, that's so cool. And then as part of the name of the boat is Madness. Is that part of just doing it? And if so,
that was absolutely it. We sat there outside in Fort Lauderdale, fell in love with this boat, decided we were going to buy it, thought we would spend the next couple of years looking for a boat.
Right.
We found it immediately and went through, it was as bad as naming a baby. We went through everything we could think of. And then all of a sudden we were like, this is madness. That's it. Exactly.
Oh, that is so cool. So just like that, this is madness. And it's perfect because that summarized what you guys felt like you're about to do.
Totally. We had lost our minds.
But you found them on the sea, beginning with purchasing a 45-foot catamaran.
Yes.
And off mic, you said you guys took a few lessons up in Ohio to kind of get ready for it. So
and down in Captiva Island on the ocean.
Okay, in Captiva Island.
Yeah,
so how long were the lessons?
A lot easier than the river. Rivers are really challenging to sail in. The ocean is very forgiving. It's huge.
Well, now that's interesting. So you sail on the river to kind of get a feeling for the craft in a very tight space, obviously, before you get out into the vastness of the ocean.
Yeah, and I think doing both was really good because once we got on the ocean, we realized this isn't as hard as we thought it was.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of took the pressure off.
One of the things. I'm sorry.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It's good. Glad you can say that. And I gather you and Terry are still celebrating marriage. It didn't tear you apart being on the river, on the ocean.
People laugh because they always say living on a boat either makes or breaks the marriage.
Yeah.
I always think a catamaran is the way to go because there's actually a lot of space. So when you get miffed, you can go away. But no, we had a great, and you become much closer and you become much more of a team because your life is depending on it. So you do.
Well, that could almost be a nice illustration for a marriage because, the husband went to the bow and Julia went to the stern when you were mad. So if you want to use as a metaphor for marriage, one is stern and one bows. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. Let's leave that. My wife might be listening. So anyway, let's get back on point. Back on point is your story reminds me of, in high school literature. I can't believe I remember this. But first of all, sailors always had a lure for the sea, right? People have always been mystified by the sea, and there was a lure to the sea. As a matter of fact, Ernest Hemingway wrote a book, The Old Man in the Sea. And so in Sandy, and just for our listeners, it was 88 days on the sea. I think his name was Santiago. He finally caught the big marlin.
Yeah.
And it's a great story of adventure, and had to beat off sharks and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So let's bring it that story forward to not just Old Man in the Sea, but Terry and Julia in the sea. So
Right.
give me a couple of adventures that were just out of this world.
We had a couple. One, we were moored in St. Augustine in the river there, which is fabulous because it's right in the middle of downtown historic Augustine.
Mm-hmm.
And our mast was 71 feet tall, and we got hit by lightning.
Whoa.
And that was very exciting. It was the loudest noise I've ever heard in my life, ever.
Jeez.
And we were like, it's like you look at each other, you're like, everything that you expected yourself to do is gone. You're just like, oh my God, okay, first, are we sinking? That's the most important thing. So you
Priority.
kind of run around like the Three Stooges, and it's like, okay, no water is coming in the boat. And then you realize it had pretty much fried our electrical system.
Hmm.
So after our little, okay, remembering what to do, we shut off the main power and we do all these things that finally came back to us.
Mm-hmm.
But then we were like, what do we do now?
Mm-hmm.
And we were very lucky because Terry grew up on a farm and knows how to jerry rig just about anything.
Okay.
So he found a way to just run the part of the electrical system that we absolutely had to have. And we managed to make it to a boatyard. And the insurance covered it, thank God. And then we were sailing again, but it was absolutely frightening, terrifying, and there's always an element of invigorating.
Mm-hmm.
We had a couple of times when we were out in the ocean and the waves were big and it was scary. I mean, it was sort of like your boat's being slammed down into these waves, and you're like,
Oh.
come on, Madness, you got it. Come on, girl. And she was a fabulous boat and always delivered. But there was this kind of, maybe it's a character flaw, I don't know, but this kind of like, we got in there and we just did it and we
Yeah.
won and we're alive. And it was just
Wow.
kind of heady to feel that you had challenged yourself so completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was part of the attraction for me. As we age, we get comfortable and we get good at stuff and we
Right.
do
Right.
what we're good at.
Mm-hmm.
So entering a whole new world like sailing, man, we were terrible at the beginning. I mean, it's a new language, it's a new everything, but that was really, I think, really good for us
Mm-hmm.
to be in a situation where we weren't the best at what we were doing.
So when this lightning bolt hit your mast, I mean, like I said, that had to be absolutely crazy. It fried your electrical system. And then we were talking about that was one of your great adventures at sea. We're going to ping a question off of that in a second. But what was your second great adventure at sea besides after lightning hitting the 75-foot mast?
I think it was we were in a storm out in the ocean and the waves got really big and the wind got really big and the it was hard to control the angle. If you angle into waves at about a 45-degree angle, the
Mm-hmm.
ride is better. But
Ah.
the ocean was just all over the place. So we were just being picked up and slammed down. And it was just one of those, is the boat going to hold together? Of course she did, because she was fabulous
Yeah.
and took very good care of us. And we survived, but it was scary. It
Yeah.
was, one of those things where you just had this realization, wow, we could die. And then it was like when you come out the other end, you were like, that was awesome.
Gave you a new appreciation for life after coming out of what
Yeah.
sounds
I
like a
mean,
washing
it's an
machine,
adrenaline
right?
rush. Yeah.
Yeah, adrenaline rush. I mean, that had to be wicked, being churned around like that,
Yeah.
slam back and forth.
Yeah, it was terrifying. Yeah. But then it was like, okay, we know how to do this. We're going to get through this and we're going to be
Yeah.
okay. And we were.
Oh, that's so cool. Something else you mentioned, which I thought was really interesting. You talked about sunsets. And okay,
Mhm.
and you said after we saw like the first, second, I mean, how did that? What was the first sunset like, and what was the last sunset or sunrise or sunset like?
The first few are just like you just sit there in the cockpit and you go, oh, life doesn't get any better than this. It's so gorgeous and it's everywhere. It's you don't have this slice of view from a window or something. It's all around you. And I mean, you could just depending on where you were, you could just look out and see incredible things, and, dolphins, and just fabulous. And then, after a year, you're like, oh yeah, look, we got dolphins. Oh, nice sunset. Because you're normal. And that sounds really spoiled, but that's kind of what happens. You can't live in a state of awe every minute. And it wasn't to say you didn't appreciate what you had, because we did all the time. But there was also not this, grab your chest and go, that's so incredible. You were like, yeah, nice, okay.
Onward and upward, as it were. For those of you who've just tuned in, my guest is Julia Inman. She and her husband, Terry Brabb, threw everything to the wind, checked off their bucket list, and purchased a 45-foot catamaran and sailed the ocean for 5.5 years. Julia, as we come to our close, there had to be some interesting people that you met along the way on the water. Share with us some interesting people and some interesting ports that you and Terry visited.
Oh, there's so many ports we loved, but I think one of the happiest times was when we went around the Chesapeake, and there were all these little towns. So it wasn't like St. Augustine, which is fabulous city, Savannah, fabulous city. But on the Chesapeake, there's this odd little sense of community. And in a way, you feel like you could have been there 100 years ago and it would have been similar. So that was I liked that a lot. That was very cool. But we sailed the outside of the Delmarva coast, Chincoteague, Washapreague. I mean, there were just so many wonderful places that it was very cool. I think the biggest learning we took away, besides the learn a new skill when you're aging, because that's really good for you. But the other one was letting go and realizing a boat's a great place to realize that you're not in charge, you're not in control. And Terry and I both are kind of driven, ambitious people, and we learned to let it go because you're not in charge. The weather is, then the boat, then the circumstances, you're way down on that list. You really learn to let go and accept what it is. You wanted to sail that day, you can't, And the other is, sailing's all about it depends. You learn fast.
It depends.
It's not a black and white A to Z binary world that you can say it's got to be a 0 or a 1. No, it's just not. Everything depends. There are no flat answers in sailing, which is a good lesson, because I really took back that life is like that. It's easy answers are frequently not the right answers. Life is complicated. Everything is complicated. That's also what makes it interesting.
That's so good. I got actually one last question before we conclude. Off mic, you had said that you have the lure of the boat, but you're the maintenance man, you're the electrician, you got to operate bilge pumps. So let's talk about the downside of boating so people get the full spectrum.
People think boating is a cocktail at 5 o'clock in the cockpit. By the time 5 o'clock rolls around, sometimes you're exhausted. You just want to go to bed because a boat is a little city. It's a very, very small city, but you have your own electrical system, your own sewage system, everything, plumbing, refrigeration, and then, you could always sink. So it's complicated. And I was very, very lucky because my husband could fix just about anything. And in fact, I got his t-shirts one year that said, if Terry can't fix it, we're screwed. So I was really, really lucky because he'd watch a YouTube video if he didn't know how to do it and figure out how to do it. And he had that kind of Kansas farmer attitude that, well, of course, it's got moving parts, so I can fix it, right? And I grew up in an apartment, and it was like, I know how to call a maintenance man.
Right.
So I did learn some skills. I got pretty good at certain things, but there were things that I was sort of like, yeah, I don't think I signed on for that.
Which goes back to your mantra, which we'll close with, about sailing. It depends.
It depends. It all depends. And that was one of the greatest gifts that sailing gave us, was moving from a world that had yes, no, because that's just not how the world is.
That's so good. For our listeners, I trust you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have with Julia Inman, recounting the story of how she and her husband, Terry Brabb, bought a catamaran, a 45-foot catamaran, and went on a sailing adventure for 5.5 years. Julia,
Great.
thank you so much for your time. What a great story, and I appreciate you sharing it with our listeners today.
It's fun to talk about it, and you make it easy. So thank you.
All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
My next guest, Raymond A. Jetson, is a former state legislator, pastor, and huge proponent of co-generation. Combining his 30-plus years history of public service, Raymond A. Jetson formed intergenerational co-leadership team at MetroMorphosis, which is a Baton Rouge-based social enterprise focused on transforming communities. I must also share that with Kentucky AARP being one of our co-sponsors, that Raymond A. Jetson is also a recent AARP Purpose Prize winner. And we're going to get into why and how all that came about. But first, welcome to Aging with Grace. Good morning, Raymond A. Jetson. How are you, sir?
I am well, my friend. Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this wonderful experience.
Well, thank you too, sir. And Raymond, one of the things that really intrigued me in inviting you to be inviting you as my guest is this whole idea of intergenerational co-generation. A lot of terms floating around there. Can you dissect those for us and tell us what you're doing and the importance of it?
Yeah. So thank you very much again for the opportunity. At the heart of co-generation is this notion of bringing older and younger together to address some of the tremendous opportunities and challenges that we face in the world today. Little that we see in the world that either presents great opportunity or great challenge is brand new. Everything that we face is across multiple generations. And it impacts multiple generations in very different ways. And so what becomes important in this notion of co-generation is how do we respond in the moment in ways that invites in a meaningful way all generations, older and younger, to come together and combine our collective skills, talents, abilities, experiences, wisdoms, curiosities to make the most of this moment.
To make the most of this moment. And this moment includes millennials and baby boomers working together, living together. And I think you kind of alluded to that off mic of actually practicing that. The millennial and baby boomers. How do they merge? How does that work? Raymond?
So at MetroMorphosis, we practice a model of intergenerational co-leadership. And so my partner, Sharita Renee Harrison, who serves as our Chief Sustainability Catalyst, and I co-lead MetroMorphosis. And we sat, and Sharita did some research as a part of one of her fellowships. And we sat and explored this notion of how do we bring together the world of the baby boomer and the world of the millennial to think about leadership of an organization, as well as how we engage the communities around us. And it just brings two very different perspectives. Someone once described it as the curiosity of the elder and the wisdom of the millennial that gets to be brought to bear in the organization that we lead. And it's a learning experience. It's also an opportunity for me and Sharita to think about the long-term sustainability of the organization. So very often when you have this sole leader in place, this founder leader, when he or she leaves the organization, there's this huge void in institutional knowledge and experience. That's not going to happen at MetroMorphosis because Sharita and I will have spent years together.
That's good.
And it also brings, though, just a different burst of energy, a different feel to the decisions that we make, because we have a multi-generational team that we work with also.
I like the concept. And one of the things in terms of when I created Aging with Grace 55 plus, it's an attack on rampant ageism. And part of that attack on rampant ageism is millennials who are pushing, saying, all right, old folks, get out of the way. It's time for me to come forward. So you have found a way, apparently, for millennials to not push us out of the way, but have a construct where baby boomers can work with them. How do you see that practically working outside of your organization, MetroMorphosis?
So two things. One, I've recently penned a piece that I entitled "Moving Over but Not Out," and I think one of the critical capacities that need to be developed by so many aging leaders who are not yet ready to go and do absolutely nothing, but have value that they can still add to an organization, is understanding how do we create space for other generations to come and to be a part of leadership, to contribute their insights to an organization in ways that allow them to legitimately feel valued and that they are contributing in a meaningful way. And that requires a certain set of skills and intentionality to make happen. But I also share with so many of my millennial and younger colleagues as I encounter them that passing the baton assumes that we are running the same race. And so it is important that we make certain what race we're running, where are we in that race, what roles do we have, because nobody just shows up at a track meet and go out and run a relay. There's practice, there's understanding the parameters of exchanging the baton. There's practice in the simple act of passing the baton. And so I'm all for passing the baton. Let's just make certain that we're clear on the race, what leg I'm running, what leg you're running, and how we navigate this so that our team thrives rather than in any individual.
And I think team thriving is something that millennials really, truly appreciate. They like hearing that. It's about teamwork, right? And so that definitely pulls it together versus the individuality of us baby boomers. Let me ask you this, Raymond, in your research and in the formation of your organization, I'm impressed with how Eastern cultures, Far Eastern cultures, seem to value aging more so than Western culture does. Eastern cultures in China, Japan, et cetera, they value even Africa. They value the wisdom, if you will, of elders, whereas Western culture, Madison Avenue is putting together products that have nothing to do with us, and therefore they perhaps are even stimulating this move to move us away. So how do you get us fixed in that as a fixture? How do you firmly make us a fixture of the top of the modern family, where under the same roof we are being effective and having productive relationships?
So in February of 2023, I launched, along with a wonderful launch team, Aging While Black. And one of the pillars of Aging While Black is leaning into the spirit of Sankofa, which is, of course, this West African concept of making benevolent use of the past. And so the question that we ask consistently is, how can we value the wisdom of the elders in ways that strengthens the what I call the industrious middle, the 20 to 50 somethings? How do we allow the wisdom of the elders to show up in ways that enhances the strength, the resilience, the commitment, the curiosity, the energy of other generations in order to build strong communities? And so, again, going to MetroMorphosis, you mentioned that I served as the chief executive catalyst. Well, we're in the process of changing my title to wisdom and longevity catalyst. And it is a way to begin to designate within our organization, here's a place where we want to hold on to the wisdom of the elders. Here is an intentional act in order to value the wisdom of the elder. As it relates to families, I think the complex challenge that we face is the decline of the nuclear family.
Yes, no question.
You know, in the past, grandma, grandpa were valued because they were in the house. They were sources of wisdom. But with the dramatic change that has taken place, not only has it put a huge challenge for something like caregiving, it's also decreased. We've marginalized and devalued the tremendous wealth of benefit that can be found in older people.
Well, that's good. And as part of your description, Raymond, you mentioned catalysts. And I think we would be remiss in not mentioning the catalyst that formed your journey and ultimately precipitated MetroMorphosis, which was Hurricane Katrina. And you said in your bio that created a 3-year journey. Share with us that 3-year journey as we go to our close and the result of that.
I was invited by the then governor, and it was a strong invitation because I was in a gubernatorial appointed position. But then Governor Kathleen Blanco, in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, invited me to lead a nonprofit that she was forming in the aftermath of Katrina, focused on displaced people. Folks from New Orleans who were displaced by Katrina. And I spent 3 years going across largely the Southeast, engaging people about trying to get them back to a home that for the longest was not really ready to receive them. And I was coming home after a 3-day trip, went to visit my mom in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And there was almost an epiphany. I looked around and realized that I was trying to help people reclaim and return to their neighborhood. And the neighborhood that I grew up in was facing very real challenges. It was not the same village that raised me. And so the question became, how do we engage in ways that truly transform inner city neighborhoods? Not fix people, not tinker with systems, but really transform the quality of life, the experiences, the institutions that exist in inner city neighborhoods.
That's so good. And I think I want you to hammer home that final comment about Sankofa making most value of the wisdom of our past, of our elders, because that not only is applicable to Black communities, but it's also applicable to communities of non-color. All communities, all families can benefit from the wisdom of and the spirit of Sankofa. So Raymond, your last words, please hammer that point home, sir, and how that can help families and neighborhoods.
There's absolutely nothing facing us that's being seen for the first time. There are older members of our community who've walked through it, been challenged by it, and found ways to navigate through it. I believe that this moment calls more passionately than probably any in the last 30 years of my life for the wisdom of the elders being married with the industrial nature, the industrious nature of younger generations. And together, I am firmly convinced that we can create a better world.
For our guests, I hope you've enjoyed my interview as much as I have with Raymond A. Jetson. He's a former state legislator, pastor, and huge proponent of cogeneration, and co-leader of an organization he founded called MetroMorphosis in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And Raymond, I would be remiss if I didn't give our listeners, viewers, an opportunity to find out more information. How to get a hold of you and your organization?
They can go to MetroMorphosis, MetroMorphosis.net. You can contact us there and find out more information about our work.
Very good. Raymond, enjoy the rest of your day, sir, and thank you for being a guest on this edition of Aging with Grace 55+. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Please visit my website, awg55.com, to listen to past episodes of Aging with Grace 55+, including purchasing a deck of 35 oversized playing cards for deeper, more meaningful conversations with the seniors in your life or community.